Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Hey, we've got a really cracking show lined up for you today. On today's show, we're going to be discussing the secret to big business success. Now, what does that mean to you and I? When we're talking about success, is it to the way we deal with our customers? Is it the way we motivate our staff? Is it the way we get out there and we do more sales? Whatever it's going to be, that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've got two of my favourite experts in the studio as well with me. This time we've flown him in all the way from the sunny climes of Florida, Gordon Treadgold. And hello there, Gordon. Lovely to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
And also Charles Bennett as well. Charles, great to have you with us too. We haven't flown you in from anywhere, have we?
About an hour away.
About an hour away. That's very good.
Flew in from Stansted.
Now listen, a lot of people won't know the pair of you from Adam. We've had you, of course, on Skype before, Gordon. Let's kick off with you. First of all, if people don't know Gordon Treadgold, who are you? What are you doing?
So I'm an international business speaker and business consultant, and I spent 28 years in IT driving large change programs and helping transform businesses, leading teams of 1,000 people.
And what are you doing now?
At the moment now, I'm speaking, coaching and consulting and helping people increase their businesses.
Before we get on to Charles, are you still seeing the same problems out there in industry when you go into businesses, when you're talking to them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the same problems. Very simple things to fix, but very difficult when when you've got your nose to the grindstone to actually take that look up and just change direction a little bit.
Are there moments when you go in and you advise somebody and you say to them, look, here's what you need to do? They go, look, we already know that. You've come in and told us what we already know. Do something different. Are there ever those moments?
There's resistance, but they don't tend to. The senior management don't tend to say that. The other people said, we knew that. They just weren't listening. But it's hard to be a prophet in your own country.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Charles, for those people that don't know you, very quickly, you're from the next 10 or the next 10 years.
The next 10 years.
The next 10 years. Not from this 10 years, but from the next 10.
We're looking at the next 10 years on the basis we're going to see more changes in the next 10 years in terms of our companies, in terms of how we look at customer, how we look at business success, than any time since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So let's focus on it. Well,
I mean, Gordon's saying that he's going into businesses and he's seeing businesses making the same kind of mistakes about that motivational effort when it comes to the senior management team. You concentrate very heavily on customer experience as well, don't you? Are we, as businesses, as our viewers are running their businesses, are we still making the same mistakes there with customer experience?
From customer experience and the way we judge success of our organisations, if you go and talk to a typical CEO, their job, their role is to try as far as possible, primarily, is maximise the value of the organisation and return to shareholders. So everything they seek to do is performance-based.
Is there a disconnect then, do you think, sometimes between what the customer expects and what the shareholders are getting and what the management team are doing?
Absolutely massive. I always, with a wry smile, I remember the little story about Keith Richards, who was well known as the leader of the Rolling Stones. And he actually said, if I had gone into music seeking to be rich, I would have never got anywhere. What he said is, what I tried to do is to bring rock and roll and rhythm and blues to the audience that mattered to me. The side effect was $350 million in the bank. So what organisations need to do is put the concept of the customer absolutely central. But in doing that, they've got to start looking at the context of customer a little bit differently how they do today. That's what we're trying to focus on.
I mean, the pair of you then, that's what you're trying to focus on. How difficult a concept is that to get over to senior management teams within, shall we say, large multinationals?
Yeah, it's very difficult because they tend to have, they tend to think in terms of products and services. So it's just sell more and pushing pushing products, looking for new products, rather than actually meeting the customer's needs. And the other thing we need to do as well is we need to meet the employees' needs.
So what does that mean? Meet the employee? Because I mean, I've been through an experience.
If your employees are highly engaged, then they'll deliver excellent customer service. If they're not engaged, they're going to be giving poor customer service, and that's going to have an impact on your product sales and customer satisfaction.
But how do you find that? I've had dealings. I was just about to say I've had dealings with a large international energy company that have penguins in their adverts, and it's taken 6 months to find somebody who actually gives a damn. But the general impression that I have about the complaint that I've had is that actually nobody either cares or has the power to care. Is that something you sometimes see?
Well, yeah. Every year Gallup does a survey of employee engagement, and every year it comes back saying around 70 to 71, 72% of staff are either disengaged or actively disengaged. And when people are actually actively disengaged, then of course they don't give a damn. They don't care. They just come in, they serve the time, they follow the process.
And that's the way it goes.
And that's the way it goes. And what we want people to do is we want our teams to be engaged and empowered, and then look to serve the customer, look beyond what they might be saying to actually what they really mean and what they really need.
If I was to divide you two, you are really very much the processors for customer experience, Charles, and I would say that you are very much the processors around successful business leadership.
Absolutely, but also driving employee engagement, because once people start to be successful and they feel that they're going to be part of a winning team, that helps drive engagement as well. So I am focused on the success, but a lot of it is about getting everybody in the, we talk about focus, and what you want is you want everybody pulling in the same direction, and if that's the right direction, now you're going to make massive improvements. And a lot of time, people are not pulling in the same direction. Sometimes they're pulling opposite each other, and sometimes they're pulling in the wrong direction altogether.
Charles,
I was going to add a little bit of that, because you almost created a separation there.
Yeah.
Actually, what we're doing effectively is we're involved with success strategies for organisations. Because we're talking about success strategies for organisations, they're very, very closely interrelated. Yeah. Organisations...
Is that an issue then, the fact that people do try to separate leadership and customer experience and put things into little silos so they feel it's more manageable like that? Is that an issue?
It's the way we've defined our organisations since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We actually define our companies top to bottom, left to right, silo specialisation. So when Adam Smith first came up with the concept 250 years ago, he was able to inject something like 4,000% productivity improvement into what was previously cottage industry. As our world starts to move faster, and I like to use the example of my grandfather. When my grandfather was born, literally a few months after we could fly 200 metres, by the time he was 75 years old, and a very happy 75 years old, we could fly 1 billion miles, 1 billion kilometres to Saturn. That is the rate pace of change we have seen within that time. What's actually happened is what we can do in 40 years, we can do in 15. What we can do in 15, we can do in 5. Here's what it means is when you go back to silo thinking. If the world outside your organisation is changing more quickly than your ability to be able to transform inside, then guess what? Organisation is going to fail. Silo-based thinking is very often about putting segregation. It almost becomes an island between yourself and your next specialist area, So you tend to look, the psychology of that behaviour says, I look at a problem within isolation. So you talk to process people, they talk about a problem statement. Actually, it's not about a problem statement. You need to flip it into thinking about an outcome statement, because actually there's a lot of different skill sets you need to be able to bring in. So the long about it says the stuff that Gordon's talking about is leadership strategies. Well, cannot work unless you've got the capability around customer to actually make those strategies work. Likewise, I can create success strategies around customer experience, which will transform organisations massively. But if they're not empowered or motivated to actually work at it, they will do nothing. Nothing will happen. They're totally unrelated.
But when we look at the traditional structure of the business, you said that the top, down, left, right.
Yes.
traditionally, in a multinational at the moment, we're going to have somebody who's going to be late 50s, early 60s. Are they off a generation that don't get all of this? Are they from a generation that really is... Somebody once said to me, how much experience has somebody got? If they could have the same first year's experience, but they've repeated it 20 times. So in fact, they've got zero experience. Yeah. In fact, they've only got a year's worth. Where there are some people that grow and learn. I mean, there's one organisation I've had dealings with, and there was some employee engagement scores that came out, and the senior management team was surprised that the employees weren't engaged.
Yes.
Yet everybody could stand back and go, well, it's because you're not engaging them. Everybody could see it, but them, it was the wood from trees.
See, I'll just throw in one word, because I know Gordon has got a big points on this. What those senior executives were seeing is how people were behaving when they were going around the organisation. Hey, Harry, how are you today? Great. What are you working on? This. Is it going well? Of course, Mr. Director, Mr. Boss, Mr. Whatever. How about you, Jim? Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Touch forelock.
I come back. How's things going? Everything's going really well. Good, strong, engaged workforce. Somebody else comes in. Let's do something independent and partial. Let's get what you really think. Oh, results are a little bit different now. You see, there is that disconnect. And what great bosses are able to do is to understand that disconnect is part of the normal way of things. You'll never get rid of it in entirety, but there's massive opportunity to do things about it right now.
But there is... Industry at the moment is suffering from this problem. We've got organisations like Google, Facebook, Apple, people like that. The generation of the people that are around them, and for instance, in the news this weekend, looking at Barclays, there's a situation there with the chief CEO of Barclays, where one more strike and he's out. Effectively, is what they're saying. This is what they're saying in the press at the moment. That's the way things happen. But is it a generational thing? And are the young entrepreneurs getting it better and getting it right?
No, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, you look at Zuckerberg, he's a millennial. You look at Steve Jobs, he's a baby boomer.
Yes.
I mean, which of those two is more innovative? I mean, I would say hands down Steve Jobs. And the last company I actually worked in as a full-time senior vice president, I actually did an assessment of about 600 staff that were reporting to me, and we did their annual review, and we created a picture chart of how they were performing, and then we colour coded it based on age and also tenure with the company, because there was an assumption that people who'd been with the company 2 to 3 years were going to be more engaged, and the younger people were actually going to be more engaged as well. And what we found was that there were good people and bad people at every single sector of that. I had people that had been with me, that had been with the company for 25 years, who were open to change, and I had 25 years with the companies, they were in their mid-50s and were open to change, and I had 24-year-olds who'd been with the company for a year and were close to change. Listen, so I don't think it is generational. It's about attitude, and I think one of the things, partly it has to do with your background. I played a lot of sport.
Listen, before you get into the sports story, hold the thought for a moment, okay? Because I think you're going to find, as I said, today's programme is absolutely fascinating. My guests today, Gordon Treadgold and Charles Bennett. You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have you with us. We're live every Monday, no matter where you're watching us. If you're watching us on iTunes, on Roku, on Stitcher, on Blueberry, regardless of it, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube right now live, then please, if you want to, you can interact with the programme. There are ways of doing that. If you want to, just send us a tweet at the moment at BCL Business TV. And if you've got a question for either of my two guests, Gordon or Charles, there's the address on the screen right now. Then just get in touch with us and we'll come back with a stunning, very, very clever answer within a matter of moments, won't we?
We will indeed. No pressure.
Yes. No pressure then at all. All right, let's go back a couple of weeks. It's of course, we've had a couple of bank holidays here in the UK over the last couple of weeks, which has meant that we've been thin on the ground as far as the programme's been concerned this particular month. But if we go back a couple of weeks, we had Costas he's one of the founders, in fact, the co-founder of an organisation called Happen. He was discussing innovation for growth, no matter what size your business is. If you haven't watched the programme, let's get getting really good response actually on YouTube and a lot of downloads on iTunes at the moment. I think what it is that for organisations that are looking at growing, how do you go about deciding that you can maybe use the same processes, the same technology that you've got in-house? How do you then move it forward using those processes to do something that's innovative? It was a great show. If you've missed it, I do suggest you get onto YouTube or go to the website, businessconnectionslive.com, watch the entire show along with the other 200 hours worth of free business advice that is actually waiting for you there. But just to give you a bit of a taster, here's what happened on, not last week's, but the week before's edition of Business Connections Live. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great show today. My guest on today's program, we're talking about innovation for growth, no matter what size your business is. And joining me in the studio is Kostas. Go on, you've got to give us your name one more time. It is.
My full name is actually Constantijn Tomas Papaikonomou, and I suggest we just keep it to Kostas. We service businesses that have basically operate in consumer worlds. So this could be in food and drink, could be in pharma, could be in home care, could be in cleaning products, could be in oral care, toothpaste, things like that. These are all products that are basically for the mass market. We help these businesses come up with what is the next thing to do. Because very often, you can imagine, if you work in laundry detergents, which have been around for so long, and so many things have already been on shelf and left the shelf again, it's quite hard to come up with, well, what's the next thing that's actually not only going to make consumers happy, but also going to make us as a business a little bit of money. It is consumer research to understand within a particular category. So if, for example, let's say, well, we have clients who make beer, big brewers. How do you figure out what is the next type of beer that would actually have a little bit of traction in market? Innovation is a big deal. Let's put that up front. I mean, by now I could say, I think at Happen we figure out how to do it, but it is a big deal for any business, whether you're a small business or a large business. So typically the people who are in charge of innovation projects within our clients maybe see 5 or 10 of those throughout their whole career. And a typical question that would come in at the beginning, when literally people walk in through the door, is say, how do we get to something disruptive? I think they know disruption means disrupting something in the market, which means offering something genuinely new to consumers. I think what they overlook is it also means disrupting your own organization, because it's probably something very different from what you made or assembled before, and that means you probably need to get rid of half your organization and replace it by something that can create the disruption. Again, it's so interesting to look at it through a business lens, because on the one hand you'll have someone inside a business, whether it's a small business or a large business, thinking about what do we do next? And they themselves are consumers as well. So they see particularly their competition doing all kinds of things of which they wish, wow, if only we had that, because that's probably where we should go. On the other hand, a big innovation probably requires a significant investment. If you just look at what makes innovation work or not, it doesn't really matter if there's a big business or a small business sitting behind it. Because it's in the end, it's...
Do you think they're the same problems?
Of course it's the same problems, because you're servicing the same consumers. It's the same quality you need to embed in that product. What might be different, though, is you might be servicing the consumer, basically the same consumers in their same frustrations or the same happiness. The way you answer that is different. If you are a large organization, you will have different considerations on how you can effectively do that. But in large organizations, the responsibility for innovation might sit with someone with like a marketing background, who sits on a different continent maybe from the manufacturing, who sits on a different continent again from the R&D. So that person responsible for innovation might be looking at the market data, and they get the reports coming in every day or every week, and they're looking, well, I see competitor X, Y, and Z move in that direction, creating these types of products. We should go there too, with no understanding or knowledge of what they themselves are actually good at from a product manufacturing point of view, for example. I guess what underlies all of this is understanding that innovation, whether it's big or small, is a disruptive force. If you would look at a business, a small one or a big one, doesn't really matter. In the end, a business is a unit which you're trying to run as efficiently as possible, as predictable as possible, to create products. Whether it's services or real products, whether it's food products or cleaning products, doesn't matter. What you want to do is you want to press a button, raw ingredients go in, and finished goods come out. And it happens in a predictable form. Now, in a way, innovation gives you the opposite of what operational excellence gives, because operational excellence is all about squeezing the last few percentages out, whereas innovation comes in and says, we're going to disrupt that beautifully efficient process, and we're going to have to do something different. Well, thank you for listening. It's been a real pleasure. My name is Kostas from Happen, innovation agency servicing crowded markets across the globe. When you're innovating, whether it's from a small business or a larger business, there's really 4 things that you need to keep an eye on. One is understand why you're innovating. What's the business reason for actually even doing anything? Which means you need to understand, are you solving a big problem or a small problem? The second is work on insights you can actually act upon. So if you're working in a salad business and you're creating salads, spend some time with people while they're eating salads if you want to see some new things. Don't get it from reports that talk about what it was like when people were thinking about eating salads. The third one is create ideas that actually make commercial sense, and that might be not copying your competition, but do things that are right for you. And the fourth one is energize the business into action, which means it's not just the people creating the ideas that are going to push it through. The whole organization needs to sit behind it, which goes all the way from the top all the way to the bottom, because there are a lot of naysayers probably scattered around any organization, and it's making sure that they go into yes mode that will really help your ideas fly. That's what it comes down to. It's what we've been doing for 10 years.
Just a fantastic show. If you do get a chance to watch the entire program, then I do suggest you do it. It's all about innovation. We were just having a chat about, innovation is all about using what you've got available to you right now to do something that's different and new. And that's what we were talking about in that program. If you thought to yourself, what a great show that was, if you're thinking this one's a great show, and you're saying to yourself, well, my organization would love to have something like this for our own company. Maybe you're sending out newsletters at the moment. Well, we all read those, don't we, cover to cover? But how about sending a TV program out to the people that subscribe to your newsletter, maybe once a week, once a month even, where the personalities can actually be seen, the real people behind the words can actually be heard? Well, we can do that for you here. We can customize and we can brand everything that you see in front of you, and we can make a program just like this one for your organization. If you'd like more details about that, well, listen, why don't you do this right now? Get in contact with us. Drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Dead easy. Or if you wish, why not pick the phone up, dog and bone. Let's do it the proper way. Let's have a bit of a conversation about it. 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. You can also follow our stream of consciousness. We put advice out there as well on BCL Business TV. Don't forget also our Facebook channel. And you can go to Facebook and you can follow that. We're having a small issue with Facebook today, but nothing to worry about. And also, you can also go to the likes of iTunes and other well-known organizations. But the most important place to go to is businessconnectionslive.com. That's our home on the internet. And you will notice all over the place on our website, we've got little orange bars all over the place saying, be a Patreon to the channel, because we don't charge for this. This is free advice, but you can support us if you wish. It's dead easy to do that. I'll explain more a little bit later on in today's program. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest today is Gordon Treadgold and Charles Bennett. We're talking about success in business, the secret to big business success. How do you go about doing it? We've kind of started off by looking at, management ideals, management philosophy, the way the management will drive a business forward, and how that connects and works with customer engagement, employee engagement. How do you make it a good place to work? How do you make it a good place for people to communicate with you? If you've got customers out there that are unhappy, the chances are they may well not come back to your organization again. So the hardest thing that any business can do is trying to get new customers on an ongoing basis. They always say on radio that a delinquent listener is more expensive to get back than a new listener. And that's exactly what could be happening with your business. Your most valuable asset, perhaps, is your existing customer database. Maybe you're not mining that successfully, or maybe you're just not providing the service that your customers would like to have. You were talking, before we had our little break, you were talking about sport and everything. Can you remember? Can you throw your mind back that far?
Yeah, we were talking about were some of the leadership challenges, were they generational? And engagement challenges, and I was saying that we did a study and we found that whether people have been with the company 25 years, whether they were millennials, whether they were baby boomers or just new to the company, we found a mixture that there was engaged and disengaged people in all of those areas, and we were talking about the different leadership styles and where they came from. And I was just wondering whether some of that came from how we got into leadership. So for me, my break into leadership really, before I got any management training, came through sport. And when you're playing team games, you can't have members of the team that are disengaged. You can't play soccer or rugby and have somebody who's sat down in the corner not participating. And we need to have that, one vision and give that, positive feedback and encouragement. So I think, maybe it comes from, where we learn our leadership, maybe.
What do you think, Charles? I know you're sitting over there. You've been listening intensely to all of this, but do you agree with what Gordon's saying there? That we've got to be very aware of that.
I'd certainly like to say yes. I would think in many cases. I mean, the sport analogy is used quite a lot, and I think that there's possibly a little bit of simplicity. I think there's a difference between engagement and not engagement, but I think sometimes it's difficult to spot. There's plenty of people playing team games who don't try that hard. So non-engaged people are not necessarily not trying, they're just not trying at 100 and something percent or close to 100%, anything close to 100% of the time. You can be participating well enough, and if you've got very, very high levels of talent, you can be participating for say 10-15% of the time. You can make a difference, but you're actually not fully engaged either.
Is that just not the human nature? Are we? I mean, are you in a profession, the pair of you, where you're always going to go in because these problems are always going to be there because human nature says it's always going to be there?
What we're talking about,
which is fantastic news for you two, by the way.
Yes, but what we're actually dealing with is absolutely human nature. Every single day, we spend chunks of our day working on things we are not fully engaged in.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. If you're an entrepreneur, you probably have even more of it. The entrepreneur has to create engagement for doing things they're just absolutely not engaged with. People working in larger organisations can actually get away because you've got structures in organisations, which means there's support structures where things are actually done for you. But here's the point. Everybody will have a natural level of engagement for what they happen to be involved in. What great companies are doing is understanding by bringing empowerment, motivation and capability, not in isolated fashion, but together up X levels, whatever X happens to be, then you can start creating the improvement in the performance. And that goes just the same for sport as it goes for businesses. So I would actually argue that actually sport is absolutely, there's loads of non-engagement in sport. It's non-engagement every single time. You can learn a lot from that, but I don't necessarily think that there's ultimate similarity between the team and the company, only because it's a more complex beast.
Sure. Now, the point I was trying to make was that I think maybe some people learn how to engage in that context. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we look at Chelsea last season, win the title one year, and then Jose Mourinho manages to completely disengage them, and they completely underperform. A new manager comes in, Conte, completely re-engages them, and they're now going to win the title again. And we need to look at it's that leader's job to engage the teams.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because the sport analogy is used a lot, isn't it, when it comes to leadership. And I sometimes wonder if the sport analogy is a bit of a switch off for some people because they don't relate to it. When we look at team games, that if you're not into that, if you're not in that particular mindset, then it could, for instance, I'm not a great, my director today, great sports fan, me, take it or leave it.
Couldn't give a monkeys,
so I'm not. So I just wonder sometimes if there's a disconnect when leadership talks are based around sporting analogies. The thing that was interesting that I felt about what you were saying, is there a point, if we do use a sport analogy in a team, the team is a business.
Correct.
Yes. So there's our team. But is there a kind of a break-even point in the size of a business where all these things start to come into play? Below that, really, it's just individuals and individual characters. But it hits a certain size of a business, and now all this interaction, this customer experience, this leadership kind of kicks in at that particular size.
Absolutely. if you think about the gestation of how a company builds, it's built about one or a very small collection of individuals coming together, and they will be basically working together, effectively doing a lot of the same things. As the organisation goes from 1 to 3 to 10 to 20 to 50, there's going to reach a time where you're going to say, well, actually, we've got to start splitting what we do in the organisation down. We can't be all involved with everything. And then, and so as you start to move into, so right now, 99.9% of organisations are split by specialisation, because we build a product or service which we sell to a customer. So that focus, therefore, is that product or service we are building, let's bring it down to the specialisation. As we go to, say, 10, 20, 30, we're starting to have to use our unique specialisations. That's when the concept of team comes in. And as the concept of team comes in, you need somebody who can basically bring that together. That's the origin of why we've actually structured our organisations in the form of a pyramid. The person who's supposed to be the most important in the eyes of who? Probably not the customer, the CEO sitting at the top, working all the way through down to the level of seniority within the organisation, people sitting at the bottom. You can take completely different representations, and you ask the customer who's going to be the most important person in that team. They could very well say not the CEO. It could be happened. Joe, Harry, Lucy, who they're relying on to get their fantastic, when I say fantastic, I mean obsessional customer service or customer experience to deliver what they want. So going back in a roundabout way is, as soon as the organisation is big enough where people have to split off into specialisations, and I will argue that the specialisations should be starting to move away from function, but that's a separate, that's when the concept of team comes in.
It's interesting because
I disagree with that.
You're really
Okay.
all right.
Yeah,
Good,
absolutely.
excellent.
Because I think the biggest challenge for businesses is when they grow. And they start with a small team and they have a concept of team, and it comes to a certain point where you're managing the team, and then you're managing managers that manage the team, and then you're managing managers that manage the team, and it's at that point where it should come in. You're absolutely right, it should come in, but that's the point at which it actually falls apart.
And is that where the disconnect comes in? Because
Correct.
we've got this from top to bottom.
We have your obsessional employee down at the bottom who is customer facing, and the disconnect between the leader could be now 3 and 4 levels between the CEO and
this process is there's nearly a distillation of information from top to bottom. Edicts are announced, instructions are given, and they work their way, they permeate their way down this chain of command, but people cherry picking what's important to them.
That's true. I'm going to just jump in on Gordon because I'm going to say it's also about people.
Yeah.
I can remember a situation. I was working for a technology company, technology and process organisations, going back about 20 years. I had a great boss. I got on very, very well with them. I thrived and prospered over the space of 4 years in that organisation. I was promoted regularly. I thoroughly enjoyed working in the organisation, working with that boss. That boss moved on. Things evolve. The new person moved in. My relationship with the next person dropped, about 2,500 levels. We couldn't see eye to eye. Whose fault it was? People say it's his fault. Actually, it's an issue with the relationship, not the individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was the relationship was not great. And in the end, I decided I was going to transition out. So what actually happens over time can be as much about people as about edicts and whatsoever. Now, the example I gave for that person, if I was working with that great boss and I had great colleagues, we worked with and trusted each other, we didn't give a damn about all the edicts and new processes that came in, because the people that we're working with and the customers we're working with transcended it. Take out one of those people, and it's quite those interrelationships can be quite complex. And I'll give you one really good example of that. You've seen the demise of Top Gear. It's been talked about. Now, whether you're a fan of Clarkson, May and Hammond, or whether you're not, nevertheless, they had a very, very good but quite complex interrelationship, and one of the biggest mistakes the BBC made was trying to replicate it, because it was about the way the relationships worked rather than individuals. And hence, Top Gear, I wouldn't say it's gone, but it's certainly had its challenges ever since. A lot of this is about people, and we tend to sort of forget the people elements. We tend to concentrate really hard on process. Is it important? Absolutely. We concentrate on teams, where they work together. Is it important? Absolutely. Let's not forget people.
All right, listen, hold the thought once again, and when we come back, what I'd like in just a moment, I'll give you a moment to think about this. Something that one piece of information that is actually a concrete a concrete process that you could suggest
Yes.
that maybe would actually aid somebody who feels that maybe they're losing control of their communications with their team, or they're not managing their team well enough? And if the pair of you can come up with that, that'd be fantastic, because then at least people can write that down and go, look, there's a piece of concrete information that I can implement into my business. So we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Okay.
My guest on today's show is Gordon Treadgold and Charles Bennett. You're watching Business Connections Live. And it's good to have you with us live every Monday. And I'm going to talk in a moment about Patreon, because you can really help us out on that. But before we get on to that, let's talk a little bit about marketing, shall we? I always liken marketing to taking the horse to water, and the sales team then are making the horse drink. So that's my process as far as sales are concerned. Jim McLaughlin joined us on the program. He's from Axial. He was on Business Connections Live 125, and we were talking about content is king for marketing. Anyone who doesn't understand what changes are coming, what they mean to their companies, runs the risks of being left behind in the race to grow your business. This edition of Business Connections Live was a valuable insight into why content is king and why honesty pays when we pitch our products and services. So here were the key takeaways with Jim McLaughlin from a previous edition of Business Connections Live.
Hi, I'm Jim McLaughlin from Axial. We're a business development company. What we've spoken about today is really around the importance of getting the right information to the right people. That's why content is king. It's increasingly important to be able to create content that will give people a reason to believe that they'll get value from the contact that you make with them and from the dialogue that you want to engage them in. If they don't see that there's going to be value, they're not likely to want to engage in that dialogue. Because content is really important, it's also important that you have subject matter experts within your organisation so that they can continue the good work that you've done with the content that you've created and continue to build on your image as a trusted partner and a provider of valuable information. If you've got a CRM system, the most important thing about making a CRM system work for you is to make sure that you have the right processes in place and the right incentives for people within your organisation to use that CRM system properly, and penalties for people that don't, because if you don't have the right information in your CRM system, you can't get the right results from it. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, honesty always pays in every business relationship. Don't oversell your product, your service, or yourself. Be absolutely honest about what it is that you can deliver, and then make sure that you can deliver that and perhaps a little bit more. That's the way to build trust.
Jim McLaughlin there, Managing Director of Axial, a great show, and he was saying that content is king. And while that was playing, actually my two guests, Gordon and Charles, both agreed that content absolutely 100% is king. Now, as you know, we produce this programme each and every week when there isn't a bank holiday, of course, in the week. We just this year, strangely enough, we take a little bit of time off and we've had a bit of a rest, but every other week, another bank holiday. How many more bank holidays have we got? We barely work here. There's one more to come, isn't there? And then it'll be August, and then we'll all be away on holiday. Listen, enough of that. Enough. Let's move smartly on. So, but of course, we're bringing you some 200 hours of free business advice. But we'd like your help so that we can keep the program and grow the channel as well, bring you more information, have more programs, even have different presenters. God help us all. Let somebody else in the chair. What we'd like you to do is you can actually support the channel. We've teamed up with Patreon, and all you've got to do is just go to our website. Look out for these orange banners. They're all over the website. If you click on that, it'll take you to our Patreon page. Now, Patreon is a way where anything from just a couple of dollars per month all the way through to, well, thousands of dollars if you want to. And there are rewards. So if you support us, it's a bit like crowdfunding, but on a subscription kind of basis. You can go to the website. We've got a number of different rewards there that you can sign up for. So for as little as $5 a month there, you'll get mentions on the program. We'll put together special exclusive content for you, and it'll be a great way to help us support the channel and keep bringing you these great programs. So if you want to do that, simply go along to our website at businessconnectionslive.com, follow the link that takes you to our Patreon page, and then as little as $5 a month is all we're asking for, and that will help us grow the channel. One of the things that we really want to do with it is have a permanent live stream running with the channel on an ongoing basis, so that when you tune in, there'll always be a program going out. And then what we'd want to do is we want to offer the bits in between those programs for advertising and sponsorship. So, let's grow this TV channel, this business TV channel together. Go to our Patreon site, go to our website, follow the orange links, and help us make this business community a huge success. You're watching Business Connections Live. Steve Harley with you here. It's great to have your company. My guest in the studio today is Gordon Treadgold and also Charles Bennett. I put them on the spot just a moment or so ago, and I said, look, listen, guys, we're talking about success, the secret to big business success. And I said, is there one process? Is there one thought? Is there one individual thing, one piece of advice that you could give a business owner, regardless of the size of the business perhaps, that would actually make a difference?
So
Gordon.
we were talking before about the move as companies get bigger, and Charles said it's about the people. It's absolutely about the people. And what we need to do, the one thing I would advocate any business to do is to keep things simple, because as we get bigger, the ability or the tendency to overcomplicate that comes with scale can take over, and when we overcomplicate, then that kills execution. So keep the business as simple as possible. Make sure that the communication is simple, and because what you want to do is we were talking about the edicts coming from the CEO down to the front line, and if you've got a lot of layers of complexity, that's when the message that gets to the bottom doesn't make any sense to the people at the bottom.
Have you been responsible then, when you've gone into businesses and you've suggested this to keep it simple, that there have been tiers of management that have now been either taken out or redeployed?
It's not so much that they've been taken. I have been involved when that's been happened, but I'm not suggesting that we take out tiers of management. What I'm suggesting is that we need to keep the communication simple and the understanding of how we're going to do our business simple, so that as it gets communicated down those tiers, we're not playing Chinese whispers, so that by the time it comes to the person on the front line, this makes no sense to them, and now they go off in a different way. Because if it makes no sense, if they feel empowered, they'll pick it up and they'll do something with it. If they don't feel empowered, they become disengaged. So the simpler we can create things, the easier it is for people to understand, see how we're going to be successful, and that will help drive engagement. Complexity kills engagement.
Have you got an example of where you've seen that? And when you say
absolutely,
when you say complexity, what do you mean? Because you often hear CEOs talking in forked tongues in a different language. I mean, they can sometimes talk in a very financially led way, can't they?
So I think there's different types of complexity. I worked in a company and we had 400 different shades of blue for shampoo bottles. And you can imagine the different number of and we used to make the shampoo bottles as well. So you could imagine the cost that went into that. It would have been much simpler to just have 40 different shades of blue. So you can have that level of complexity where there's a lot of components involved, or it can be complex where you have to tell people 7 times and they still don't understand what you're talking about.
So keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. So when you asked me, do I have an example of where I helped with that? There was a university I was doing some work at. They had 5 departments. Each department had 5 goals that they were working towards. So they had 25 goals overall. Nobody could see how these goals connected and interacted and drove to the overall vision. And in fact, I would say there was no overall vision. Because if there was, these 25 goals would have moved towards it. And what we did was we took those 25 goals, we threw them out, because when you looked at them, some people were conflicting, which created disengagement, and we replaced them with 1 goal. And that 1 goal was that this university would be in the top 50 universities in the country. And when we did that, the 5 department heads immediately sat up in their chairs, because they could see now how they could work together. It was an aspirational goal for them, and it was something that was easy to communicate to every single level. For these 25 goals that they had 13 strategies that were supposed to be helping achieve them. Each strategy had a 100-page introduction. And they said to me, "Do you want to read those introductions?"
getting bored hearing about
I was
it.
like, that's exactly what I said to them. You know, I'm falling asleep,
Yeah.
and I haven't picked one up yet. So one goal, that
One goal
everybody can
and focus on
understand.
it.
Correct. Now that one goal is going to break down into different things to different people. But as long as we know what we're all aiming towards, and actually what happened, sadly to say, we got everybody excited, we put a proposal together, we went to see the Vice Chancellor, who was the CEO, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. We've paid a significant amount of money for these 13 strategies, we're going to persist with them. Everybody became demotivated, and that university dropped from number 82 in the country to 94.
Lessons learned. What about you, Jim?
I would build on the concept of removing complexity. I'd be sort of thinking about, as well as you go through the process of removing complexity, develop the people ahead of developing the business. Now that goes against quite a lot. We're here for the business. We're trying to build our value. Blah 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 blah. Actually, the best thing is about creating momentum in organisations is via the people. So you bring empowerment, motivation, capability together, not separate silos, but together, and then you develop the people in order to be able to do that. We were talking on the way down, on the car on the way down. You can't create an empowered workforce if they don't have the capability to be able to deliver change or even the motivation. You can have the most capable workforce in the world, and there's plenty of highly capable people around, but if they're not empowered, they're not motivated, how much will they achieve? Zero. So actually a lot of this is bringing those 3 points together and actually developing the people ahead of the business, because that's the first principle of momentum. Second point is there's going to be a focus to this capability, and from my perspective it's always been about the customer. So the focus moves away from the service and the product we build but to the outcomes. Now that's slightly different. You're focusing to the outcome, of which the product or service is a constituent component. There's a number of other things that are also going to be part of that outcome-based jigsaw. That's the second thing. So you start to think about the outcomes you create rather than what you build. It's 180 degree. And then thirdly, you become obsessed about it. So they be in the principle of customer obsession. That obsession basically then starts to drive how people behave. It's very easy to say, I treat my customers brilliantly, whether it's 5-star, celebrity, whatever it happens to be. That's an easy thing to say. How do you do it? Now, sitting beneath that, there's a whole plethora of techniques and tools that we've got, which we use in order to be able to do it. But the organisations going to dominate markets today are going to be obsessed about their customers. They're also obsessed about their people. And empowerment, capability, and motivation all go hand in hand. If you want to look at a case study from right now, go and look at the Zappos story. They don't always get it right. They're looking at their structures right now, and they've found a way where they've actually demoted their workforce as they've moved away from their traditional structures. But they've done a brilliant job of actually putting great outcomes to employee and great outcomes to customer, built by employee obsession and customer obsession go hand in hand. It's that obsession that creates the driving difference, whether you're a one-man band, you're a medium-sized company, or you're amongst the biggest. That's what you've got to start to drive against.
It's interesting listening to the pair of you with your examples. There are a lot of businesses that I think will go through the processes, Charles, that you've talked about, and they see those processes. This energy company we were talking about earlier on,
Yes.
across the bottom of their emails, we wear the customer's shoes, we go the extra mile, and all the other things that they claim. And it is no more than lip service that has actually been said at the bottom of
Totally
this.
lip service.
And the thing is that when you sell what your wares into an organisation, they will implement it, and that's the implementation, the fact that it is seen. How does a company take the theory of what both of you, I mean, yours is quite straightforward. That's what you want to achieve it. But with customer service, the people that should be asked are never asked, and they're the customers. How do you feel about how good our customer service was?
Well, customers are actually asked. They're called voice of customer programs. What they tend to do
Well,
is they,
hush my mouth then.
well, they are asked, but there's a very big but. It's not very effective.
Yeah.
Because they'll say, right, okay, let's try and get to a better understanding of our needs. So you have focus groups, there might be emails, might be surveys, whatever it happens to be. Now just think about it. if you're going to ask a customer questions about their wants and needs, their preferences, how many questions can you ask her before they start to get bored and actually start to move away, decommit? It's about 5, sometimes 7, so 5 to 7. Are those? So you're not going to learn very much from that. Ask yourself a second question: Are the questions going to have to be simple, or are they going to be sort of complicated and divergent? Actually, they decommit very fast if they actually are not simple. So I can only ask 5 questions.
Really? Simplicity, yeah.
I can only ask 5. I can only ask 5 questions. They've got to be simple, and on the basis of those answers, plus some focus groups, I'm building a customer strategy for the organisation. How accurate am I going to be on the outcomes I'm going to create for my customer? This being 100, this being 0. Voice of customer strategy today, about 20, 30%.
Really?
20 to 3 out of 10. We need different approaches. But here's the thing, every single one of us are customers. Steve Jobs said, he was talking, if I want to know what my customers want, I do not ask the customer. I don't need to. I've got tens of thousands of people in my organisation. I can actually find out. And by the way, there's new groups of techniques coming out which are innovative but proven, which can actually get a deeper understanding of customer than you could ever do by simply asking them.
All right, now I asked the pair of you, I'm going to ask you again another challenge on this one.
Sure.
So we were talking about the individual processes. The question then that I need to ask you is how does, and I want you to think about this, how does a business implement then the processes that you've both talked about? How do they first of all identify that their business truly needs it? Because there must be a lot of businesses out there that are going with blinkers down, thinking that everything is okay. How do they identify? What are the right questions to be asking to find out whether you are getting it right within your organisation? Have a think about it.
Okay.
Don't answer.
Yeah.
Have a think. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's programme is, I don't know whether that's a good or a bad question. We'll find out in a moment. Gordon Treadgold and Charles Bennett. You're watching Business Connections Live, and it's great to have you with us. We're live on a Monday, as always. Just while they're thinking about that, just a little reminder. Don't forget, you can always download all the programmes on iTunes. It's dead easy also to leave a review. The reason we ask for a review is because by you reviewing the programme on iTunes, more people will then have it recommended to them, and therefore more people will watch it. It's easy to do as well. All you've got to do is go along to your iTunes, find the programme, view it in iTunes, as you can see there on the website, and then find this tab here. It says ratings and reviews of the programme. Click on that. There you go. That'll take you down to this little bit here where it says customer review. Write something glowing about Gordon and Charles. Leave them a 5-star review and say how great we all are as well. Now, when you do that, that helps us grow the programme. So, once again, this is a community. We are a business community. We're all grown up now. We all go to networking events. We all go racing all over the country. We're all trying to do business. I mean, there is nothing worse than trying to do business and people getting in your way. Let's grow this business community and make it the #1 business community in the United Kingdom and maybe even in the Western world as we know it. Now there's a big aim. There's a big target for us to hit. If you can do that, we'd really appreciate it. And don't forget, if you want to contact us as well, all you got to do is drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. You can telephone us on 01784 256 777. If you wish, you can follow our stream of consciousness at BCL Business TV. Don't forget to watch us on Facebook Live. We do broadcast on there, simulcast at the same time. But more importantly, do go to the website where you'll find all sorts of great information and free downloads and everything like that at Business Connections Live. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guests on today's show, Gordon Treadgold and Charles Bennett. We're into the last segment of the programme. It has flown by. It flew by the last time the pair of you were on, and this one has also, likewise, it's flown by. So the question, how do you identify it? How do you know you've got a problem? Because there are going to be businesses out there that don't know that there is an issue within their organisation. They don't realise that they've got a customer experience issue. They don't realise that they're great leaders, because everybody thinks that they are. How do you identify it? What are the telltale signs?
So for leadership, a lot of it's about retention. If you've got a lot of turnover of staff, that's a good indicator of poor leadership.
I would imagine it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the thing to do is to just admit you've got a problem. You know, everybody can do better. Do you know what the world record for running a marathon a day is?
No.
607. A Spanish guy ran 607 marathons, one every day.
Every day?
For 607 days, whilst he did a full-time job working rotating shifts. So that, when you look at that, for me, when I read that stat, I thought the bound of possibility has now gone from here to
because you are a marathon runner yourself.
I am
aren't
indeed.
you?
My arms are too short, so I think we can all do significantly better. So don't sit there and think we're great. Make that assumption of actually we're not great, and if we weren't great, what could we do about it? So just accept that you could do better, and then look at putting things in place
What
to do
about
that.
arrogance that you see at that tier of management, where there is nearly this godlike feeling in themselves that everything they do is right? How do you get through the arrogance? How do you identify in yourself your own self-arrogance?
Well, you've raised a very interesting point, because we all have we call it arrogance. The individuals would probably call it justified belief. So they've got, let's use the word justified belief. The most difficult organisations to deal with are the ones who are still profitable and still doing relatively well, because they're saying, you may criticise A, B, C and D. And let's face it, if you're in a C-level or you're in a senior role, you're going to get criticised by somebody for something every single day. You can't please 100% people 100% of the time. And if you have an organisation where people are vocal about it, you're going to hear it again and again and again. The organisations which are doing badly, so they've started, their P&L has started to go like this, and it started to go into decline. People are starting to leave, people are starting, analysts and shareholders are starting to complain. That's the time it's very easy to do something about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of symptoms for what I call organisations that are going to be approaching that point before they actually do. That's the difficult point. So they're already profitable, they're still in growth, they're believing they're doing all right. How do you actually get them to believe that they need to do something differently? So one of the things that we get involved with is we start to look at, we do competency assessments of organisations, which is actually not judged by third parties, actually judged by the people within the organisation. It's not just about identifying the problem, it's about looking to be able to do something about the problem. That's number one. Number two, and especially the area of customer experience, putting customer experience and the concept of customer obsession absolutely at the centre will never happen. In other words, it won't become a primary driver unless you can properly measure the impact. Now, there's studies after study after study that if you say, take S&P 500, I can take the portfolio of top players versus the middle players and the bottom players in terms of customer experience ratings, and the top players will outperform the middle ones by a factor of X. So that's 3-4 times what it happens to be, depending on the time period you look against. And people go, wow, that's fantastic. Macro, proved, big tick. Now, surely you've got to do it for organisation. No, it still doesn't happen, because C-level want to be spoken to in the language which is most important to them. Tell me what the impact is going to be on my organisation, my people, my processes, and actually measure it in the language that is most important to me. So C is going to be P&L. Somebody in operations is probably going to be cost and efficiency. There's going to be all sorts of different things. Now, if you can show me, now I'm going to start to listen. Now I'm going to then ask, okay, so what was this innovative customer thingy sort of idea? You've just proven something which I didn't think was possible. So until you measure it and prove it, you can't then, the art of the possible just doesn't resonate. The CEO in South Africa actually said to me, every single week I have 22 different options. They're all incredibly well sold. I'm not short of options, I'm not short of alternatives. Which one do I take? So it's the concept of taking these concepts and creating a social proof around it. That's how you drive the right thinking and the right beliefs.
Right. At the beginning of the program, we said that this was going to be the secrets to a successful business. We said that, and we are actually approaching the end of our discussion today. What I'd like, if I may, is to invite both of you to give us your key takeaways from today's programs and what we should all be remembering. In your particular case, I think you're going to be down camera number 4. I think I don't know whether camera number 1 will be okay for Gordon. Yeah, no. It's both down this one, I think. So if you don't mind, Charles, first of all, the key takeaways that we need to remember from today's program that will make the difference, and are those key secrets that will make a business more successful. You ready for that? Say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Charles Bennett from Next 10. Key takeaways from today. Number one, it's more about people than processes and structures, albeit processes and structures are very important. Number two, think about how you develop people ahead of developing the business. Creating rapid change is all about people, and the momentum you create is actually is on the basis of the beliefs and the permission that you give them in order to be able to do it. Number three, if you're going to focus on what you're going to do, is a focus on the customer, but not in the context of the product and service you build, but in the context of the outcome you are trying to provide. So those will be my 3 tips coming out of today.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that. That's Charles Bennett. And so now's your turn, Gordon. Gordon Treadgold. The airways are all yours. Don't forget to say who you are, where you're from.
So, hi, my name is Gordon Treadgold, the CEO of Leadership Principles, and my takeaways today are it is all about the people, and if we want to achieve the best business success possible, then we need to have as many of our teams engaged as possible, and currently we're around 30 to 32%. And the way we get people engaged is keep it simple. If we overcomplicate it, we impact their ability to execute, which can then leave them disengaged. And we also need to tell them what's in it for them. It can't just be about the customer and the company. There has to be something in it for their employees. And if we keep it simple and we tell them what's in it for them, we'll drive up engagement, which will drive up results.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. So that just goes to some of the key things that you need to be taking away from today's programme. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. Is there anything, do you think, that we've probably missed out? A final word from the pair of you in summary. I know that was kind of your summary, but
yeah.
Is there something, do you think, we've missed out from today's programme that is intrinsic and important to what we're actually doing?
So one of the things I would have mentioned earlier is when we were talking about generational leadership styles, the old command and control leadership is well and truly dead, because we do live in a hyper-connected world, and a lot of the millennials are looking for engagement and connection with leaders, and if you persist with the command and control style of leadership, it is going to die. You need to be engaged with the people. Leadership now is about driving engagement.
There is one CEO that I know, and what he does, he's a very talented people man, and he surrounds himself by experts, and they make him look good because he is good, but he has been very clever in the way that he uses the people around him to actually move the business forward. And, you know, it's interesting. What about you?
I was going to say almost exactly along those lines, believe it or not, because you actually need to have a group of people who are driven by fundamentally the same beliefs. So you've got the belief in terms of customer, but there's also the belief in team, the belief in working with each other. There is the term that we tend to use in organisations, quite negative. We use the concept of maverick. But a team-based maverick could be extraordinarily powerful in an organisation. Work on those people relationships. I've observed the organisations that often tend to work best is where you tend to get the interrelationships between those people. So all the other things we're talking about, the capability, the motivation, is great. Make sure those interconnections, the chemistry between the individuals is so important. And going back, I was knocking Gordon on the head a little bit for using the very, very simple team analogy. Just think about what happens to a football team when the manager loses the dressing room. What happens to a company when the CEO or the new CEO or the new head of department comes in, who's effectively lost the rank and file of the organisation? Yeah. Pretty much the same result, I'd suggest.
This is the Queen scenario, isn't it? She thinks that every toilet smells of fresh paint, isn't it?
Does,
and there is a certain element of that in it.
Is that not true?
Listen, the pair of you,
Not
Charles
where I
Bennett,
go.
thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Gordon Treadgold,
thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in. Thank you, and thank you. Fascinating show. Hope you've enjoyed it today. 2 great guests. And don't forget, if you have any comments about this, do subscribe incidentally to the channel as well. But if you have any comments that you'd like to give, well, then go to our website and leave your comments there. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave them below the individual program. There's the website address in front of you even as I speak. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today on today's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, just before we leave you, just a quick reminder what's coming up over the next couple of weeks on future programmes. Deborah Hume is going to be coming in. Now, Deborah is a very, very talented lady. She's from a company called Minerva Engagement. Not only is she a neuroscientist as well, or a neuroscience practitioner, but she's also very heavily into the whole area of HR and business management. So a fascinating program with Deborah coming up in a few weeks' time. Samantha Earle, she's the General Manager of Per Thames Driver Training. What could that mean to your organisation, to your business? Well, you'll be able to find out when she joins me here on the programme. What are your responsibilities as a company owner when it comes to company vehicles? You'll find out on the programme. Jackie Jarvis will be joining us here in the studio, and an old friend of the programme, Ian Dixon, will be coming back. And last time he was on, we were talking about goal setting, but that practically wraps up this edition of the programme. Once again, thank you very much indeed for watching the show today. My thanks once again to Gordon Treadgold and also to Charles Bennett. Don't forget, we're back live next Monday at 12 noon, but until then, have yourself an absolutely fantastic week and be successful out there. Bye for now. Bye-bye.